What's up, guys? Welcome in to another edition of SSPN Offseason. Now, I know it's just me, and we haven't had a ton of content out this week. That's because Ethan has been out of town traveling, and I've also had a little bit of a busy week myself. So I appreciate all you guys for being here. And as you guys can see by the title, we're going to be talking about the best player fits in the draft, the Spurs draft picks that they have to fit around Victor Wembanyama. Now, obviously, this is something that Ethan and I have been talking about for really since the season ended and even a little bit before the season ended when we first started to look into the draft. But I saw this morning Johnathan Givony, our guy that we've been going to a lot recently, and of course, ESPN's main draft expert. He just released this article today, guys, and we got to go through it together. NBA draft ranking best player fits for Victor Wembanyama. So you guys already know how Ethan and I feel on all of this stuff. So let's just go see where Gavoni is at now on June 14th, 2024, as we are now officially 10 days away from the NBA draft. Excuse me, it's June 26th through 27th. I don't know why I thought it was the 24th. Maybe that was last year's dates, and I've just got Wemby on my mind. But for some reason, I had that stuck in my head. So we are 12 days away from the draft on June 26th. So a little bit mistaken there. But let's go ahead and dive into this article. Obviously, you guys kind of already see what's happening here. He's like, okay, the Spurs have 4 picks. Who's going to fit best next to Wemby? We're almost there. It's less than 2 weeks away. Wembanyama is almost an MVP. We won the number one pick. We saw the season last year, but despite all that, 22-60. I know he said a lot of other stuff there, but we've talked about this so much. If you've watched this channel, you already know all this stuff. So let's just jump right into it. Obviously, a little bit of a spoiler right here down below, but let's read this. Who are the draft prospects the Spurs who are the draft prospects the Spurs who have the number 4, 8, 35, and 48 picks should consider with Wembanyama in mind? I wasn't sure what the grammar was there, but I see he's got the little double entendre there with the comment. I don't know if double entendre was the right word there. I don't think it was. Um, but he had the little the double comma here, so that actually did make sense grammatically. But let's rank the best players in order of best fit. And here is number one for the first round at the number 4 pick. These are his top 3 players. Number one is Reed Shepherd. You know, we've talked about this. Ethan and I have. Um, he has Stephon as his number 1 player at number 4. I have Reed Shepherd there. You guys probably saw that in the big board video that I did a couple weeks ago as well. So I agree with this. I think the shooting splits, the defense, all of the little things and fundamentals that he has, and just as much of a sure thing that Reed Shepherd is, I feel like at number 4, he's the most sure of a sure thing that you can get with the least amount of holes to poke, just in his profile as a prospect. So let's see what Gavoni has to say. Why Shepherd is such a great fit next to Wembanyama. The Spurs were a fraction of a percentage point from being ranked the worst three-point shooting team in the NBA at 34.7% last season. Wembanyama's greatest gift offensively is his shot creation. He ranked 5th in the NBA in usage last season, 32.3%, something that will likely grow as the Spurs better utilize his talent operating out of the low post as a pick-and-roll ball handler and a one-on-one isolation prowess from the mid or high post. It will be very important to surround Wembanyama with enough floor spacing to ensure entire defenses don't collapse on his drives every time he puts the ball down. I know me and Ethan have mentioned this. It feels like 1,000 times since this game this past spring, but the Rockets game, I can't remember exactly what month it was in, but Wemby, it was one of his. I mean, all things considered, he still had a double-double and like 3 or 4 blocks, so it really wasn't a bad game. But at the time of the season, with the way he was progressing, and then really just overall, when you look at his season, it was one of his worst games. And a big part of that was because, as they're saying right here, I don't know if I would. I mean, Keldon, I understand calling him a streaky 3-point shooter, but I still think he's a little bit of a different level than like a Jeremy or a Trey or a Zach. Malachi's kind of probably in the middle of those guys for me personally. I completely agree that Keldon needs to get more consistent with his three-point shooting, but I wouldn't put him in the same category as Jeremy Sohan or Trey Jones, is I guess what I'm trying to say there. But regardless, the point that he's trying to make still stands. And when I was talking about the Rockets game, they could just clog the paint and leave Jeremy Sohan and Trey Jones open. And when they can't convert, obviously, as I'm saying this, you guys know this, Trey Jones improved at the end of the season and really showed some flashes of promise, but still, for the majority of the season and for the majority of Trey Jones's career, unfortunately, that has been something that teams have been able to game plan. And that's something that, when you have a player like Victor, you don't want teams to just be able to easily clog the paint and leave non-shooters open, and then they've got a good defensive game plan, and you're not even able to utilize one of the most incredible talents we've ever seen. I think y'all get the point there. I'll stop talking. Playing heavy minutes alongside streaky shooters or three-point shooters such as Jeremy Sohan, Trey Jones, Zach Collins, Malachi Branham, and Keldon Johnson wasn't optimal in that regard last season, and with playoff defenses in mind, that's another really good point, the Spurs will surely need to upgrade here. Enter Shepherd, the best shooter in this draft class, who made a blistering 52% of his three-pointers at Kentucky. There's other shooting splits, but they're like almost, I don't want to just talk out of my behind here, but like most of his shooting splits are above 50%. And I want to say like the lowest I saw was like 46, 48%. So y'all can fact check me there, but if memory serves, it was like I said, like maybe the lowest percentage I saw was 45, but anywhere from the 45 to 48 range is still like, that's still really good is the point. But still, again, 52% on threes at Kentucky. Shepherd has an excellent feel for creating for the game, creating for others, and is a reliable decision maker who makes the game easy for his teammates with his patient, unselfish approach. A lot of backdoors from Reed, a lot of bounce passes, through traffic that I remember from his tape. He's definitely, as much as, still, we saw a lot of things that jumped off the screen at the combine for him athleticism wise, but maybe, when he has the ball in his hands, if you watch the tape, it doesn't look the same as like a Rob Dillingham who's on the same team as him. But even with that in mind, in traffic and I don't know if it's necessarily an isolation situation, but when he has the ball in his hands and he's driving to the rim, he can create for others. And he's not just, going in one dimensional, like I'm going to go try to get a bucket here. If he's driving inside, he's keeping, he's seeing the floor fully. Maybe that will turn into, a little pull-up mid-range jumper or driving to the rim to get a layup. But sometimes it'll turn, into a bounce pass backdoor cut that leads to an assist for Shepherd. Or maybe he finds, a shooter after he draws two driving to the rim, on the perimeter. The point is, he's always looking to pass, even though he has the ability to pull up, or go get a layup. Shepherd wasn't prolific operating out of the pick and roll. And that's kind of why I was saying I wasn't sure if it was isolation situations. I wasn't sure how to describe it because it wasn't necessarily him coming off like a pick or something like that. More of that I remember is like almost like they're saying here, creating for others, like just with the ball in his hand when he's driving to the rim. At times playing with brakes on at Kentucky more than one would hope. But he did show sparks of ability making intelligent reads out of ball screens. So that's true too. But the other thing that we've got to remember here, and ironically, another Kentucky point guard is right below here. We'll get to him in a second. And I've said this a million times. You guys already know this. But for the viewers who are maybe watching this channel for the first time, Kentucky had a ton of guards. Antonio Reeves, Rob Dillingham, DJ Wagner was supposed to be a top 10 pick going into this season. The point that I'm saying here is maybe if he's on a different team without, as many like 5-star guards, he might be running out of the pick and roll a little bit more. And I think if, you need to adjust to playing the pick and roll, I think Wemby might be one of the easier players to adjust with in the league. With that being said, it's not just going to be all fine and dandy. We learned that last year. It's going to take some time to learn, but when I think of the two-man game and the pick and roll with Devin Vassell and Victor Wembanyama, and then I think of Reed Shepherd's skill set, even though they aren't exactly the same, I think that definitely Reed Shepherd in the pick and roll with Wemby would figure itself out. I'll put it that way. This is an area he can continue to grow in alongside Wembanyama, who is one of the league's best lob targets, but also dangerous popping out beyond the three-point line, operating out of short rolls, and finishing with tremendous touch and creativity, rolling to the rim with his 8-foot wingspan. Shepard's team first mentality, for example, happily coming off the bench all season at Kentucky, even though he should have been starting, make him well suited for playing in the shadow of Wembanyama and all that comes along with that. And before we get into Rob Dillingham here at number 2, which is interesting for me, obviously I've talked about the appeal and I was very high on Rob Dillingham. And even as he's maybe slid down my big board a little bit, he's still somebody that I would be very happy with the Spurs picking at 4 or 8. I probably would prefer somebody else at 4, but if the Spurs are picking him at 4, that tells me they really believe in what he can become. So I would trust that. But at the same time, I was forgetting exactly what I was going to say there. Going back to this, Reed Shepherd's team first mentality, he had a comment at the NBA Combine during his interviews. It was a clip that I saw on Twitter, just, asking about, what he feels like his role on a team is going to be or what he wants to do. How does he see himself in the NBA on a team? And he just basically said, I just want to do whatever the team needs to help me. I feel like I'm fundamental. Like when I talk about the fundamentals, even he was saying, he's like, I feel like I can contribute in a lot of areas, and whatever the coaches and the team ask for me for what's best for us to win, that's what I want to do. And that's why I compare him to Derek White so much. I know we did another video where we compared Devin Carter to Derek White in a lot of ways. And I think that maybe Reed Shepherd, it's just so hard. You don't know with this draft. We're just going to have to see how it plays out. But I've said this before, and I'll say this again. I feel like almost Reed Shepherd's floor is Derek White. And maybe his ceiling isn't like that much higher than that. Maybe it is. Maybe it's higher than I think. But I think like at the worst, he's going to be that type of player. And those type of comments and just this last paragraph here from Givony, that's another reason why I feel like it's so comparable to Derek. Because if you think about the finals this year, even the whole playoff run, there will be some games where Derek scores 5 points. And then like the beginning of the playoffs, he was like scoring more than at one point in the first 2 rounds. Maybe it was just the first round, but it was one of those 2 rounds. I remember seeing this all over Twitter from StatMuse. He had more points than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Jason Tatum. Anyways, I know I'm going on a Derek White rant here, but the whole reason I'm bringing this up is like, you can see in the last finals game, even though he kept shooting, he didn't really have the best offensive game. But there's been other games where he's had, he's been one of the top 3 scorers on the team when Tatum has an off night. He does whatever it takes. And so that's the comparison I'm trying to make with Reed and Derek there. I hope y'all got that. Rob Dillingham at number 2. This is definitely a surprise to as much as, once again, the pick and roll potential. And if Rob Dillingham reaches his ceiling, the offensive potential with him and Victor would be pretty ridiculous. That is the upside of Rob Dillingham. If y'all want to go check out my other thoughts on that and Ethan's as well, go check out our Rob Dillingham prospect breakdown and a bunch of other videos we've done on Rob Dillingham as well, with guys like Lou from Miami Heat Beat at Saucy Takes on Twitter. Check him out for a lot of draft content. But with all that being said, let's see what Givony has to say about him. As prolific a shot creator as Wembanyama was last season, he wasn't a very efficient option, ranking among the league's most turnover-prone players and sporting one of the lowest offensive ratings of any high-usage player in the NBA. Circumstances matter there. You guys know that. That's to be expected from a 19-year-old rookie thrust into a gigantic role on a fast-paced team that often had little semblance of coherent offense around him, other than literally Devin Vassell. But it's certainly something that the Spurs will want to optimize moving forward. Surrounding Wembanyama with better shooters, Dillingham converted 44% of his three-pointers this season. This Kentucky team was just shooting the lights out. Will be beneficial. But also, right, so better shooters, that ties into the Reed Shepherd point earlier. But also, adding a dynamic ball handler who excels in pick and roll, has speed to burn, turning defense into offense in the open court, and can go get his own shot at almost any time he pleases, could surely help. That sums up about why, like, at the beginning of this whole draft process, Rob Dillingham was my number 1. When you're looking at just that, it's hard to not get excited thinking about him with Victor. Dillingham is lightning in a bottle. ranking as one of the best scorers in this draft class already as a freshman. He's also an underrated passer. I'm glad that Givony is saying this because a lot of people criticize this, but like to hear this from Givony is nice. Who has real creativity dishing off a live dribble, a skill he can continue to hone. And that's the key thing there. He's saying like he can get better at it. That's basically what he's alluding to. And like orchestrating sets and all that type of stuff, like I'm not saying there's not room to grow there, but he led Kentucky in assist rate, and he was second on the team in assists to Reed Shepherd. Like it's Reed Shepherd, and again in a very crowded backcourt. So I'm a little bit higher on his passing than maybe some other people. His biggest concern, his size at 6'2", 164 pounds with a 6'3" wingspan, can be mitigated to an extent by operating off of Wembanyama, who's already the NBA's premier rim protector. And another good point that a lot of you guys in the comments have made, and that Ethan has even talked about when it comes to Rob Dillingham, is that when you look at a lot of the small scoring guards around the league, none of them are necessarily like insanely good defenders, you know? So when you're drafting a Rob Dillingham prototype and you're looking at his ceiling, like the best version of him isn't going to be an elite defender anyway. So that's just something to keep in mind. While some around the league don't view Dillingham as a Spursy type of pick based on their drafting track record, he has been openly campaigning to be picked by San Antonio. There'd be no questions about how he'd view the team hierarchy if the Spurs pair him with Wembanyama. At the NBA draft combine in Chicago, Dillingham said, "He could be one of the best players ever. If I'm playing with Wemby, it's obvious. I am coming in to give Wemby the ball." So as much as they say he's not that much of a Spursy type pick, maybe because he's from overtime elite and, you know, he's Rob with the shifts, it's all the step back isolation, you know, highlight moves. He's also saying this, you know, and if there's any place to come hone your defense and playmaking and fundamentals and maybe hone in a little bit of that, you know, that highlight overtime elite-esque stuff, I think it's San Antonio. I'll just leave it at that. And then Zachary Rissacher, where the Spurs could get him, number 4. Interesting that he's even putting him here. And I'm really surprised Castle is not in this top 3. I mean, maybe the shooting is the reason, you know. I mean, but I'm surprised he put Dillingham in over Castle. But to Rissacher. Some teams views the Spurs as a potential trade-up option for Rissacher, whom they've scouted extensively last season. Others view the number 4 pick as his floor, an outcome he'd surely be thrilled with. Rissacher played with Wembanyama an assful in 2021-2022. I did not know that. I can't believe I didn't know that throughout this entire draft process that we've been doing this, guys. I gotta feel bad about that. But that's another key on top of the connections he also has with Tijan Salaun, who we'll get to in a little bit. Spoiler alert. A team official there described the two as being extremely close at the time, which is not a surprise considering their similar ages. I believe their sisters also played on the French national team in like 16U, 17U FIBA type stuff. So when they were traveling, I believe it was him, Rissacher, and Salaun that all used to hang out, you know, during that time. I could be getting Rissacher confused with Bilal Coulibaly there, but still, Wemby has a lot of French friends that also are good at basketball. That's what I'm trying to get at. Yeah. Rissacher's shooting would fill an obvious need, and he'd also help the Spurs defensively with his passing, an area San Antonio struggled in last season. Perhaps the Spurs already have a veteran point guard in mind whom they will target on draft night. They could create an attractive package consisting in part of the Toronto Raptors 2024 first-round pick number 8, and the Atlanta Hawks unprotected 2025 first, the Chicago Bulls 25 first that is top 10 protected, and other future picks owed to them from Charlotte, Atlanta, Boston, and their own as needed, allowing them to pursue other positional needs such as wing with the number 4 pick. So I thought when I was reading that paragraph, I honestly thought he was going to say, oh, well, they could trade up. That's an option. And then, you know, make a move for another point guard later in the year. He's saying if he falls to 4, they could create an attractive package. So we could use the number 4 pick and then trade number 8 and some other stuff to maybe get a guard. This seems like it's definitely alluding to Trae Young. especially especially when he's including the Atlanta Hawks unprotected 2025 first and mentions them again. Maybe that's the same pick. I don't know if that's the case of what he's alluding to, but just because I know Atlanta would probably want their pick back, and you'd have this number 8 pick as well that they could pair with number 1. That's what I'm reading into the tea leaves there. I could be wrong, but regardless, what I was misunderstanding earlier, what he's trying to say is if we pick Rissacher at number 4 and he falls there, we could trade the number 8 pick and some of our other picks and maybe some of our other young pieces as well to go get a veteran point guard if they wanted to. Now let's go to number 8 and his top 3 players here. So wow, Nikola Topic at number 8 is his number 1 option. The Spurs often value positional size, feel for the game, and character, and they have long been attracted to international players over the years. The idea of drafting a player with a torn ACL, like Topic, who will likely need to sit out all of next season. Wow. I thought it was only going to be like, I mean, I guess it is a torn ACL, so I shouldn't be surprised. But the last time Ethan and I talked about it, he was like, is this going to, like how much is the injury going to affect his season? And I was like, it's going to affect it significantly, but I still didn't even realize he was going to be out all of the year. I thought there might be a chance maybe he comes back in like the last 2 months or something. But that surely isn't the most attractive option. But history says it's prudent to think about picking the prospect a team feels will end up being the best player in 5 years, not just 5 months from now. Topic has excellent size for a point guard at 6'7", and perhaps the most advanced feel for the game in this draft, with his ability to navigate ball screens and pick apart opposing defenses. Improving his shooting will be key, but his career 87% free throw percentage portends good things to come. The other thing I'll say about his shooting, as much as it's not a sure thing as maybe some other guys, you can you could find a lot of tape from him, like hitting step backs and hitting open threes, pulling up in transition and draining tough shots. The percentage isn't there right now, but I think the free throw percentage is very telling, like Givony mentions here. And I also think that that's going to end up translating decently. Even if he's never like a crazy 3-point shooter, I would be very surprised if he doesn't end up at least being like on average 35% plus. Interesting he has him at number 1. I get what he's saying about, not the best player in 5 months. You want the best player in 5 years. Me and Ethan have already talked about this. Sorry for repeating myself again if you guys have already heard this, but this is the same knee within 5 months. 2 injuries within 5 months, essentially. He was out for 4 months when he injured it originally, and that was only supposed to be 6 to 8 weeks at first, so it was a little bit more severe than they thought. It didn't get as healthy. He wasn't as healthy as fast as they had initially projected. And then a month later, after he comes back in the same knee, tears that ACL. I know it's only a partial tear. When there's so many other options in this draft, it just kind of scares me a little bit. Maybe I'll be proven wrong and he's like the next Embiid. I know Embiid's still dealing with injury issues, but in the sense that he comes in with some injury issues and then is able to actually like play significant minutes and, become a top player in the league. I know now that Embiid's getting towards his 30s. That's not necessarily the case, and he has had injuries throughout, but I think y'all get what I mean. Like maybe it really is just like these 2 injuries in this month and it's bad luck, and he ends up being pretty healthy for the rest of his career. And this doesn't, derail, his athleticism and stuff like that. But because, again, of the injury to the same knee in such a short time span, and the fact that the Spurs have 2 picks here, it's just not. I don't understand. I would rather draft a Devin Carter or a Stephon Castle, who hasn't been listed here. And obviously, I don't know if Castle is going to be available at number 8, but there's some other guys that I would rather draft. There's a chance that Rob Dillingham could be at number 8, and at this point, I'd rather draft Rob Dillingham and Devin Carter than Nikola Topic. And maybe it ends up working out and he ends up, 5 years from now, this really is the case. And he ends up being the next guy. But because of that injury stuff, I don't feel like the Spurs need to take that risk right now. That's what I'll say on Topic. But I don't necessarily disagree with anything that Givony said here. I really like his tape. It's just the injuries. Dalton Connect at number 2, somebody, excuse me, that Ethan and I have talked about at times. We haven't talked about him as much lately, but I'm glad to see him here because I think because of his age, and then I've seen some defensive criticisms as well. Like, and I understand that, but I still think that's a little bit harsh. Ethan and I have talked about that also. Not saying he's like lockdown, but also I don't think he's like a potato either. Um, but let's read what old boy Givony has to say about Dalton Connect. Connect is the most prolific scorer in this draft, not named Zach Edey, averaging a robust 28 points per game per 40 minutes, despite entire defenses trying to slow him down each game. He was the SEC Player of the Year in his first season playing in the conference after transferring from, I believe, Northern Colorado. He converted 40% of his threes, but also did quite a bit of damage in the open court, attacking closeouts, coming off the pick and roll, in the post coming off screens, making him a pretty complete offensive player. His defense, his biggest weakness, can likely be mitigated to an extent with Wembanyama behind him. Let me just stop right here. Well, here, let me read. Allowing him to use his strong 212-pound frame and 6'9" wingspan to pressure the ball without fear of giving up blow-bys. See, like he's even like saying like he's got some like he's got some assets in his frame. I saw a lot of blocks. There are some times where I saw him got blown by, but there were also some times where I saw him stay in front of people and keep his hands up, and swat the ball. I could go on a whole tangent about Dalton Connect's defense, but I think a better way to summarize this would be I don't think Dalton's defense is in the same place as Rob Dillingham's when we compare them, because those are like the two prospects that I've heard the most defensive criticisms from. And I would just say that I think Dalton isn't at the same deficiency that Rob is. And obviously some of that has to do with his frame, but even from the tape that I watched, you could say that a lot of Rob's defensive highlights, not to go on a whole Rob's defense rant here. And there's a video we made about that, so y'all should go check that out. But a lot of Rob's defensive plays, were like when he just kind of go in and it'd be a double team and he'd swipe his hand down and he'd get a steal. And as much as that's a good play and you love to see that, it's a little lucky to an extent because if he doesn't steal the ball, that could leave an open shooter open three, and then you just double teamed and gave up an open shot. And some passing lane stuff like that. What I'm trying to get to is in Rob's, you kind of saw more of that stuff, like double teams, jumping passing lanes. Maybe he'd get a steal here and there when somebody loses their dribble, kind of transition type stuff. With Dalton, I saw much more like on-ball defense in his tape where he was actually able to stay in front of guys. It wasn't always, perfect. It wasn't that there's definitely still some times that he got blown by, but if that's going to be one of your weaknesses, playing with Victor is a great way to mitigate that. But also his frame and his wingspan, like there were a lot of times where I saw him, trail when he got blown by and still stuff the ball at the rim. And, that's where it's nice to have a 6'9" wingspan. So anyways, those are my thoughts on Dalton Connect. I don't think it's, it is his biggest weakness if you have to pick a weakness, but I don't think it's as bad as people are making it out to seem. That's just me. If the Spurs want to make a push at drafting or making the playoffs next season, drafting a 23-year-old consensus first-team All-American will likely get them closer to that goal than a teenage prospect who will need time and reps to get up to speed. This is what Ethan's been saying for really since the draft lottery. He felt like that Dalton Connect, not saying that Dalton Connect's his number one wing pick, but when we've talked about Dalton Connect since we found out that the Spurs got the 4th and 8th pick, the thing he said about him was he's someone that you could draft while also kind of simultaneously accelerating the timeline because of his age. So Givony just basically put those thoughts into a nice little sentence here. Want to give Ethan credit for that. And then the last person here, Tijan Salaun, power forward, also a little bit of a 3 as well from Cholet. What a great fit next to Wembanyama. No prospect in this draft class shares the combination of physical tools, high-level intensity, shot-making versatility, and upside that Salaun brings. That's a pretty crazy sentence right there, and that's why he's gotten a lot of Giannis comparisons. I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm just saying that's why there's been a lot of Giannis comparisons for him in this draft. although the shooting ability is different than Giannis, it's more the physical tools, high level intensity, versatility, just up and upside. He's saying no prospect of this draft shares the combination of all this that Salaun does. Again, that's why there's a little bit of the Giannis talk there. The 18-year-old plays hard, shows impressive confidence, pulling up off the dribble from deep vantage points, and has considerable room to grow as the draft's youngest player projected as a first-round pick. I didn't know that he was the youngest projected first-round pick. That's something else to keep in mind. The fact that he's French probably won't hurt his cause as the Spurs look to build a locker room that Victor Wembanyama enjoys being a part of, but Salaun will be a lottery pick regardless of whether the Spurs select him. We've also talked about some of the things that Wemby has said about Tijan and also some things that Tijan has said about Wemby. So go check out some of our other videos to hear about that. The main question revolves around their timetable, which has been accelerated by Wembanyama's incredible two-way ability. San Antonio's urgency to be competitive might make drafting a more raw prospect such as Salaun less attractive. So that's really the only thing there. But also, if you get somebody at 4 that you feel like can come in and contribute immediately, that might allow for Salaun to be more appealing. And also, if Victor wants him at the end of the day at 8, I think they're probably going to roll with it. And also, if you saw our pre-draft roster breakdown, the 4 is the most open spot on the roster, with just Jeremy Sohan being the only player at the 4 on the Spurs roster on a full NBA contract. So that's another thing that is an appeal for Salaun and how he could kind of seamlessly fit into the rotation if we want to elevate CD Sissoko, for example, and kind of get him into the 3 rotation. But that is all on Tijan there. And he does have some second-round picks for us. So Terrence Shannon Jr., the shooting guard / small forward from Illinois. He was at Kansas before. There's been a lot of legal stuff going on with him. Y'all can see that on the screen. I'm not going to dive into that, but he was found not guilty, so we'll see how all that goes. But that's a name to watch. And he's somebody that if maybe this legal situation wasn't going on, he might be ranked higher in the draft. Now, with that being said, that also is something that could just, turn the Spurs away from him. But I think that is a legitimate name to watch for the Spurs, especially if he really falls. Adem Bona, center from UCLA, nonstop intensity was a trademark of Spurs basketball dating back to their championship seasons, but that has waned in recent years, something the front office would surely like to revive. No player in this draft plays harder than Bona, who brings an exceptional motor, toughness, and explosiveness, throwing his body around while being one of the best defensive playmakers in this class. Bona could develop into a good option to give Wembanyama a breather for 10 to 15 minutes a game, while also playing alongside him at times, depending on matchups. Definitely not opposed to that. Me and Ethan have talked about run, jump, and dunk centers. I believe Adem Bona has kind of been flirting with coming out over the past 2 years. I could be wrong about that. And I haven't dove into his tape a lot, but from what I've heard of him and the little things I've seen here and there, it seems like he would kind of fit into what we want in that backup center role for the Spurs, and which was one of the biggest weaknesses for the Spurs this season, especially on the interior in the paint and physically. Leave it at that. Juan Nunez, Spanish point guard from Ratio Farm Ulm. I mightily butchered that name. Ratio Farm. It's probably not pronounced that way. Okay, let's learn about Juan Nunez. Nunez is arguably the best pick and roll playmaker in this class. He's an absolute magician who makes creative, decisive reads and picks apart defenses with spectacular vision and flair. I like to see that. I don't want to just go totally country comparison here, but is this a little underrated Ricky Rubio? I wouldn't be mad at that in the second round. But players with his size and playmaking aren't easy to come by, making him someone a team will want to draft and develop long term. I got to check him out. I'm curious what his size is, because if he's alluding to that, maybe that could be an argument let's just go with this guy in the second round, instead of going for somebody like Topic. Now, I don't think they're probably comparable prospects because this dude is a second rounder and, Topic has been in consideration, for top 3 at some points this year. But I think you guys get what I'm saying there. If he has size and playmaking and is apparently, and is that type of passer, that is just something to keep in mind with this draft. I'll leave it at that. I am not saying that Juan Nunez. I'm not trying to compare Juan Nunez and Nikola Topic. I hope y'all don't take it that way. I think y'all probably got what I was trying to say there. Second round, though, here's the last one. I don't even want to go through. Well, wait. Let me see if y'all can even see it. Oh, yeah. Y'all can see it on the bottom. I don't even want to go through these first two because of this one down here, but I'll read these other two. Cam Spencer, shooting guard, UConn. So one of the guys that Stephon Castle had to go and compete with, and he shot 44% from three. So one of the best shooters in the draft. Many of Cam running off screens or pulling up off the bounce. You like to see that. He is a smart, unselfish player who can moonlight in a playmaking role and brings a tough, fiery demeanor that will be appreciated by his teammates and coaches alike. His age, oh wow, he's the oldest player in the draft at 24, so he's even older than Dalton Knecht. And defensive/athletic limitations will likely relegate him to the second round, but it shouldn't surprise anyone to see him carve out an NBA career considering his skill level, feel for the game, and competitiveness. He's a UConn kid. He's from this UConn team. If he's 24, I'm assuming he was on UConn's team last year too, so he's a winner. I think he would definitely fit into the Spurs culture, and I love his shooting ability. But look at the one here at number 3, though. I'm not even saying it like because I'm not even saying that as like, oh my gosh, look, we could have a chance to get LeBron if we get Bronny. I'm just saying like at 24, I don't know if I want to go with that, especially like if we're in a situation where we already picked Dalton Knecht, then I definitely wouldn't want to go with him. Oh my gosh, went down to golf. But yeah, I mean, I can see what Givony's saying, and I think he would definitely fit in. I wouldn't be mad at it. And I think this last pick, well, actually, to be honest, I think we're probably going to trade one of these picks just like we did last year. And this last pick is probably going to be on a 2-way. So if that's the case, I'm really not mad at it. But anyways, enough on Cam Spencer. I think y'all get why I'm a little bit hesitant there. Jalen Wells from Washington State is at 6'8" and hit 42% of his threes this past season and has real upside to grow into at 20 years old. He hit a late growth spurt and playing 1 year of Division I basketball at Washington State after transferring from Division II Sonoma State. That's another Dalton Knecht, Derek White-like story, so I like that. He's not the toughest or most versatile wing around, as the game understandably moves a little too fast for him at times on both ends of the floor. But he is a worthy flyer at this stage of the draft and will surely continue to improve with his experience. Well, with the way that he's shown that he can improve going from D2 to T1, being at 6'8", having a plus 40% three-point percentage from 3, I wouldn't be mad at that at 2. And here's the one that everybody's been wanting to talk about. Bronny James at number 3. Honestly, okay, before we even read this, I will say, like, genuinely, I'm not mad at a flyer on Bronny in the second round. We need guards. Yes, he's got a lot to develop, but he's going to play in the G League anyway. I am not mad at Bronny James being our third 2-way on the team. That's just what I'll say. James' limitations as a ball handler and shot creator could be mitigated alongside bigger playmakers such as Wembanyama, allowing him to operate in a more narrowly confined 3-and-D role that best suits him at this stage of his development. His defensive versatility, open court explosiveness, unselfishness, and budding perimeter shooting are attributes that could be attractive to the Spurs. It's like I read Givony's mind before I even saw it on the screen. I swear I didn't even see this part, especially if he's willing to commit to a 2-way contract like almost every player in this range will end up signing. I would rather go with his upside than either of these two guys, as much as I think Cam Spencer would be able to come in and contribute. I'll just leave it at that. So to recap, guys, once again, thank you guys for checking out the content today. I didn't even realize this was going to go 40 minutes, but I did have a lot of thoughts on this stuff. Reed Shepherd, Rob Dillingham, and Zachary Rissacher are his top 3 fits at number 4. At number 8, his top 3 fits are Nikola Topic, Dalton Knecht, and Knecht and Salaun. In the second round, Terrence Shannon Jr., Adem Bona, Juan Nunez, and then the final pick, Cam Spencer, Jalen Wells, and Bronny James. So we appreciate you guys so much for hanging out today. because I would just be here by myself if it wasn't for you guys. So tell me your thoughts on Johnathan Givony's list here. Tell me also your favorite best fits at 4-8 and even some second rounders as well. Ethan and I haven't really dove into those too much. But yeah, once again, we appreciate you guys coming in and hanging out and checking out SSPN Offseason. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to hit that like and that subscribe button below. If you want to stay updated with the show, follow us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. We appreciate you guys. We'll catch you on the next one. Go Spurs, go.